you so much for coming out tonight. My name is Alexa, and I'm on the events team here at Books Are Magic. We are so excited to have Miller Oberman, Jason Crawford, Joan, Kwon and I.S. Jones with us tonight to celebrate Miller Oberman's Impossible Things. And before, before we get started, I just want to point out a few logistical things for tonight's event. We will be doing a Q&A towards the end, so think of some questions and hold them tight. There is a restroom right there. Should you need, I know it's a little tight with all the chairs, but we'll accommodate. After the talk tonight, Miller will be signing and personalizing books right where you all checked in. And then if you're joining us on the YouTube live stream, please explore the link in the box below and buy these books. All right, the fun part, Impossible Things. Impossible Things offers an intimate account of fatherhood, loss, and grief. Oberman's latest reimagines the well-worn terrain of fatherhood/boyhood memoir and functions as a living elegy, communicating with the past, the dead, and the unknowable while speaking to the possibilities of healing. Miller Oberman is the author of Impossible Things and The Unstill Ones. He has received a number of awards, God, excuse my breaths, including a Ruth Lilly Fellowship, the 1962 Augustine Award, Knight Artist Fellowship, Poetry's Magazine John Frederick Nims Memorial Prize for Translation. Miller's poems have appeared in The New Yorker, Poetry, Hopkins Review, Poem a Day, Foglifter, London Review of Books, and The Nation. He teaches and serves on the board of Brooklyn Poets and teaches at the writing at the New School. Miller is a trans-Jewish anti-Zionist committed to the liberation of all. He lives with his family in Queens, New York. Jason B. Crawford is a Black queer poet, and they are the author of forthcoming collection Yeet and the Year of the Unicorn Kids. A Lambda Literary Fellow, Crawford was born in Washington, D.C. and raised in Lansing, Michigan. Joan Kwon is a diasporic Korean poet, winner of the 2024 Perugia Press Poetry Prize for her book Daughter of Three Gone Kingdoms and Night Swim, and winner of the Diode Book Prize. Joan's poems have been featured or are forthcoming in Poetry, The Slowdown, Poetry Northwest, Passages of North, Poetry Daily Terrain, Ninth Letter, Rattle, AWW, The Margins.
She's very impressive.
Very impressive, and there's more. All right, I.S. Joan is an American Nigerian poet and editor. She is a senior editor for Poetry Northwest, where she runs her column, The Legacy Suite, a 3-part interview documenting the journey of writers publishing their debut poetry collections. Her chapbook, Spells of My Name, was selected by Newfound for their Emerging Poet series. She is the 2024 Artist in Residence at Northwestern University with the Black Arts Consortium, where she is at work on her debut collection of poems. All right, without further delay, please welcome these accomplished poets.
Did we know the order?
No, I think we were just going off vibes.
I think
honestly.
I'm supposed to go first.
You are, yes.
I mean, but it's also your party. If you don't want to go first.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
It's good. Thank you all for being here. I'm gonna like try to keep time in some way, so that I don't just read for like I don't read for 4 hours. What am I going to do? I'm going to start a stopwatch. Thank you all so much for being here. I do not take for granted your attention to poetry tonight. Yeah, truly thank you. And I'm so honored to be here with the three of you whose work I admire so much. And especially IS, as I was just saying upstairs, it means so much for me that you're here. We read together when my first book came out, and I didn't know if I would ever write another book.
And then you did.
I know,
Check you
and
out.
I did. How more impressive you've become.
Oh,
I was like, will IS even read with me now? Okay. So my book, Impossible Things, includes poems that I've written that are in dialogue at times with excerpts from an unpublished memoir by my father, who lost his first son in what seems to have been a tragic drowning accident when he was 2. And so I've turned some of his memoir into erasure poems that are kind of back and forth with mine in an attempt to have a conversation with him. So I'll read some of them. This is called All These Beloved Books. All these beloved books gently strewn around me are about death. Paul Celan is writing about death, and Cheryl Boyce Taylor is writing about death. Pamela Sneed is writing about death, and Kiese Lehman is writing about death. Wendy Xu is writing about death, and I want to read the book that tells me how to wedge a candle in a slot of air just so, to make a gap for my father to come through tonight, just this once. I have so much to ask you, Papa, so much to tell. I have cooked you a fat steak, and you don't have to worry, being dead, about your cholesterol. This is a heart-healthy meal, O decomposed one. You are nothing but chambers of unblocked light. Talk to me. You've got acorns all over you. Virginia creeper grown up through the soil above what was once your hands. I'm gonna unmask it briefly while I'm reading. This poem is called The Wind is Loud, and it's a ghazal, if anyone here is interested in form. I know you are. Form nerds. The wind is loud. The wind is loud on the water today. I think about him drowning. I walk to the store for a bottle of wine. I think about him drowning. I read to Rosie before nap in the rocker where he's drowning. I make her a peanut butter sandwich cut in triangles. Think about him drowning. I rinse her little blue plate and spoon in cool water where he's drowning. I get up to pee in the night with the light off and he's drowning. An old woman throws crusts to gulls. In their descent, I see him drowning. Wondering if there's a word for how birds all move together, drowning. Thinking about my father, thinking about him drowning. I think about him drowning. This is a section from my father's memoir, Memoir 3. I reach our neighbor's home. Their son is holding Joan. He grasps her there in the middle of the road. She is struggling, pointing to the unfenced ground level pool in the back. There is Joshua, lying on his back beside the pool, like pale blue marble, perfect, beautiful, lifeless, like a copy of Joshua. I touch him. I lift him up, cradle and rock. So yeah, I had no plan here. This is called 23 Facts About Joshua's Death. 1. Joshua died in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. 2. After wandering. 3. From a farmhouse. 4. In a U-bend of the Schuylkill. 5. On Drabelbis Road. 6. In my father's youth. 7. 138 feet above sea level. 8. According to Patrolman Ronald Pennypacker. 9. Arthur Nickel glanced out his window. 10. And saw the body in the pool. 11. He was pronounced dead at the scene at 8:30 a.m. 12. By Dr. DeWitt Dabbick. 13. Who himself died in 2015. 14. Whose father emigrated from Turkey. 15. Who fought in the Battle of the Bulge. 16. Who never learned to swim, though once he thought he could in a saltwater pool. 17. To his surprise, he sank like a stone in a freshwater pool. 18. Dabbick delivered 1,000 babies. 19. And people say he didn't charge them if they couldn't pay. 20. He checked Joshua for signs of life. 21. There were none. 22. Regarding weather, the Pottstown Mercury reports that the dense cover of dampness obscured the sun throughout the day, except for a few brief moments in the afternoon when the sun cast a feeble shadow. 23. Regarding Kepner and Romich Furniture, whose ad appears beneath Joshua's obituary, Kepner and Romich Furniture sells every year enough wall-to-wall carpeting to cover Route 422 from Douglasville to Limerick. This poem is called Commas. I've lost my time. See, this is what happened. commas. Came home and I found my typewriter case a little crushed. It's my fault probably for leaving it looking like a stepping stone for someone not tall enough to climb onto the toy chest, but who very much likes to clamber up there. My father built the toy chest for me, and now the result is my comic key sticks won't fly up to make its mark. So no more clauses of that tender kind, or just imagine them there, or figure out how to use a semicolon, or type the word comma when I need one. Lots of things are called commas, not just punctuation. A certain butterfly, a bacillus responsible for cholera. The chest's nails are slowly withdrawing, I notice, pulling themselves out in the invisible hammer claw of time, or else the wood itself's ejecting them, feeling maybe, hey, it's been long enough, let me just be planks again. Or it could be the climbing itself. Did I also climb? And all that climbing's worked against those nails a little each time after my father held one in his hand and one in his mouth, and with his hammer made a box.
Phew.
Your approval is all that matters. All right. This poem is called The Centaur. And Jason likes it, so I'm gonna read. The Centaur. First, they called me it, and then, ignorant of how my people use this word, they mashed up the meager nouns they had for gender and called me the goy, and said to not be one or the other was to be nothing. It ate the grass it was shoved in, knelt at salt licks. It took the barbs and kicks and crushed them into fur and leather. Oiled and burnished, it made those halves into one galloping body, horse and rider. The centaur endured the school day, cruel gray rag, filth stiffened. The boys and girls who fit so easily in their costumes looked like stick figures, crude and two-dimensional. Dante already knew, it read later. In the inferno, in the seventh circle of hell, centaurs guard the river Phlegethon, one of Hades' 5 rivers. Phlegethon, river of fire, river of boiling blood, which boils forever the souls of those who commit violence against their neighbors. Centaurs guard the edges, shooting arrows at any of these sinners who try to move to the shallows. When sometimes I wish I'd had a boyhood, I remember those days instead. My 4 muscled legs. I was 7 feet tall then, riding myself, carrying myself. A centaur is never lonely.
Wow.
I really highly recommend revenge poetry.
It's good for the soul.
Yeah, it's really good for the
so
soul. It is. I'm gonna see. Okay, I'm gonna read one more. Can I read 2 more?
Yeah,
I'm gonna
this is
read
your
2 more.
party.
It's my party. Okay. I'm gonna read this poem for my mom, who's not here, but my brother is here, and he makes a really great appearance in this poem. Comes with, like many people, I have a mother. She has always been and remains a big gasper. The gasps are loud and not a little scary. They sound extreme, like if you found out something so shocking or one last breath before your ship went down. The other day in torrential rain, I very slowly backed her car into a fire hydrant someone had against good sense painted white. She gasped, like if you learned of a coup in your country, or if waiting for the subway someone shoved you close to the platform's edge where you stood holding your baby. Sometimes I feel anxious. I realized the other night I could have just ended the poem. My brother says it's not the truly frightening things that cause the gasps. Where do they come from, I ask him. Is it hereditary? But neither of us recall our grandparents doing it. Maybe I suggest she gasps for the whole family, all its known and unknown shock, for all assimilated German Jews who train themselves to golf at country clubs, decorate trees indoors at Christmas, and never under any circumstances to gasp. Maybe she does it historically for them all. My brother finds this generous. It's about control, he says, or lack thereof, and a transference of the helplessness to affect the truly terrible things onto the mundane. And that ended the matter, though not, of course, the sound. And who would I be without it? Calmer, less jumpy, or nothing at all, as if that gasp were the lines in a poem that never seem right, but without them the poem loses all meaning. Now, or even earlier, is where I'd usually describe the sound. I view lyric description as an important part of the poet's job. I tried rocks against a rasp, or frozen wind on a file sucked through a chipper shredder, or inhaling broken glass. Perhaps I'm too close to this sound, like how growing up, current jelly chicken comes with string beans almondine. Everything had something that comes with. And only now I realize it wasn't limited to dinner. The gasp and life are linked. Sound lives in the body, currents through cells, gales in the throat. Thank you all so much. I'm going to, if I can find it, close with this poem called The Cake. The Cake. The last time I saw my father, when we both were breathing, it was almost my birthday, the air alive with lilacs, forsythias rioting in the lane. A little wind lifts the curtains, my mother hangs invariably in every window. He doesn't like my birthday cake, which is chocolate, and asks for cake like that, pointing to a painting his friend made. Gold white sphere surrounded by deepest blue, which before then we called his go into the light painting, and now call the cake painting. I think he's looking at me, but he's looking past, to the window where they gather. Do you see them? No, I say, tell me. You don't see them? My father, the others? I saw only him seeing them. The cake still tasted good to me. I thought I knew the difference between things you could and couldn't touch. A window frame, a wooden chair, his soft sleeping shirt, the air. Papa, I say. Papa, he says. Thank you guys.
Definitely go next because I think mine are the most depressing and
Perfect.
I hate going last. Hi everyone, thanks for being here and for showing up for Miller, who I just have so much admiration for so many different reasons. I'm really, really grateful to be here to celebrate you. I'm going to read a poem called Fairy Tale, which is in my book, Daughter of Three Gone Kingdoms. And I went through this period of time where I was really stuck in my first book and the grief that came with my first book because it was a very specific grief experience. And I started to write poems that imagined a different version of things. And I actually wrote a whole chapbook of them, which I will never publish because it doesn't feel necessary. But there are a few of those from there that made it into the book. And this is one of them. And some of these poems will reference loss to suicide. This is called Fairy Tale. In this version, I do not bury you in the black dress, the one with the tag still on that you hung on the outside of your closet door. A dress you wouldn't have been caught dead in when you were alive. Do you see what I did there? Death is absurd enough as it is, so I guess I'm sorry for making bad jokes, but lately, they're all I've got. You were never one to laugh at my jokes unless they were truly funny. I could count on this about you. I counted on your rage, too. It struck like lightning, and I was the cowering tree. You could always quit smoking without trying, either total control or none at all. I read a poem this week about two women laughing over what to wear to a funeral. as if a funeral is an event, like a tea party or a concert. How should we do our hair? What is the right outfit to wear to honor a life? Which shoes? In this version, I bury you in your favorite Halloween costume, the Cheshire Cat one, with a grin painted on where your mouth is. I adorn your body with every piece of jewelry you own instead of saving it for your daughter like you ask. Once upon a time, my sister was born. She was loved in all of the ways she longed to be loved. A doctor prescribed the medications that would finally help her, and she didn't ghost him. She never bought the gun, never stored it loaded in her nightstand. Her child never found it. Julia, in this version, I don't bury you at all. Miller had a poem about something about like your father and a hammer and a nail and a box. That was amazing. So I was like, ooh, I have a poem about a hammer. This is Wildfire, which is after a very famous line from an Anne Sexton poem. And it's also in this book. Wildfire. For 3 days, yellow haze has enveloped the coast, bathing the city in unease, coating our narrowing throats. Another year has passed without you. Today, your daughter, now 10, asked if you left a note. More questions will come. It is June, and I am still not brave. Wildfires cast their smoke across landscapes, but you stay dead. My grief stalls at the edges of every map, gnaws away at its shifting borders like a toothless beast. My grief is a hammer and demands I find new ways to remain a nail. No one can say for sure how long the forests will burn. I am finally less angry, but this feels like another thing to mourn. What will fill my lungs? Stay inside, they say on the news. Be an obedient nail. Shut the windows tight and wait. See, there's always this dead silence. Which I don't want that to be the last reading, you know what I mean? Okay, I'm gonna do one more. Okay, so this is my 22nd year as a public school educator. I don't get a lot of applause at work from the 12-year-olds, but I do have some poems about teaching, and this one is also about grief, but it's in the context of the school. This is called Cobweb, and it's from my book, Night Swim. Sister, yesterday I spoke to the ER nurse about the day your son died. I asked her the question I'd wanted to ask for years. If we'd reached him sooner, gotten him to the hospital faster, would he have survived? She hesitated, said, it's unlikely. And if he had lived, he would not have been the boy we knew. The boy who one winter built a snow fort for his sister's Barbies, refused to throw water balloons to avoid hurting anyone, swallowed his own suffering so no one would worry. If he had made it, he would have needed around-the-clock care, brain quiet, even as his heart continued beating. The nurse asked, would you consider that a life? Sister, remember how on the day he was born, his Mars-red body cooled to pink in my arms. His veins like a network of questions connected, leading somewhere I could not see. In the parking lot at work today, the trees are solemn and unmoving, as though even the wind decided to take a bereavement day. Sparrows burst across the sky, chase each other in their ancient choreography of joy, their wingspan broadening his absence. Sister, at school today, the science teacher writes questions on giant Post-it notes around the classroom, and the students take turns answering. Questions like, what is a rainbow? What is gravity? In response to what is a cobweb, one student writes, a mysterious string of silk, complex, strange and beautiful, so easily torn. Thank you.
I can go unless you feel like you really want to go.
It's up to you, babe.
Yeah, you can go.
Okay. Hi, friends. Well, first off, thank you for having me and being part of this, because I also love your work, so I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you for being here.
I'm going to read 3 poems, not from my forthcoming collection, because y'all will get to hear that at some point in time, because I don't have to read it a lot. So I'm reading new shit because I can. I have 2 major projects that I've been working on simultaneously, so I'm going to read 2 from one and 1 from the other. The first one is cataloging loneliness, no matter what space I'm in. So I will leave whatever space, like New York City Pride, and I would think about how loneliness sat in that space, especially for me. So I'm gonna read 2 of those. Loneliness catalog, Hicks Park. It's not always a lie I tell, my excuse to wander the backwoods behind my old house. I say I wish to capture the trees in their undressing during the mid-thrust of fall. Today, I photographed an old black cherry tree starting to lose its bark, close to collapse. Today, 2 deer danced in front of my lens long enough for me to document it. Today, I followed a man for miles into nowhere until I was completely lost, no longer sure of which direction the sun would set. The man asked me what I was doing out here so late in season. I pointed to 2 swallows circling each other in what I assumed was in lust, to say, I like to find things when they're unknowing of their own heat. He nods. He understands, but the words are caught in his throat like a brush of leaves. A third man follows us through the forest in hopes that we would lead him to his unraveling. He says he found a mushroom so orange it could be the sun. Told us he would take us if we wanted. We nodded without questioning his intent. We are all here for the same thing, but none of us are willing to admit it. So this is what I'm going to read right now is actually one of the original set that I wrote. Loneliness catalog, Spa Castle. The wordle of the day is adage. I struggle with anything that tries to make faith out of thin language. Who am I to learn to pray to? Who am I learning to pray to if not the thick root of a God's tongue? At the spa, I touch men under quilts of water. We're so close that I can see their breath. Every slight stroke of my fingers to his thigh is met with a glance towards the door or a wall, an exit, but for who? The rules have been stated very plainly. No public displays of affection. So we do not touch in the view of lifeguards. We lap the pools of men, baiting anyone to join us in the cloaked, covered steam room. I too think of this as praying, choosing the faith in the thickness of the fog. What will cover us like the hands of God if we let it? Lust is a faith of its own, and all the men here are falling victim to its smite. I am not devoid of this. I cup the small dent in a boy's back, and we get so close to each other that we almost kiss. Okay, I'm gonna read one more. Apparently, I got something in my eye immediately after starting reading. That's great. So the other project I was working on, or have been working on, is documenting or writing about photographs from Alvin Baltrop, who was a Black queer photographer from the Bronx, who documented the queer life in the 70s and 80s on the piers. So what I did was I took a bunch of photos, or I looked at a bunch of photos and I wrote to them and tried to say what would happen, like what I thought was happening there. And they all have the same title. And because Joan did the Anne Sexton quote, I pulled this one out because I felt like it was required now. Listen, synergy, that's what that was. Untitled, 1975 to 86. I'm not sure if we shall all make it to June. We are already so tired. Sexton said something like this once, then lived until October, leaves drying around her feet. Am I afraid to live that long? I am afraid to let June be the marker for us, the dead bodies piling like sloppily laid bricks. By the time we found our third beloved spitting maggots from his lungs, I had forgotten I was even supposed to mourn. Grief became the only thing I could taste, its iron drenching the air. I've run out of flowers to offer to this river. Instead, I fold my palms into lilies. Instead, I offer my dead to feast. Oh, how they want us dead. Oh, how some of us still breathe. I celebrate in the mouth of a man I do not know, but who knows how many more Junes we both will survive. Remember the river, the dead summer, the faultless birds that would pick at our toes like French fries? Did you tell the wind to not carry the stench of bile back from the morgue? Tell the wind. It keeps us remembering. Thank you.
And then there was one.
My favorite.
I love you so much.
I just put together the most intense lineups possible.
I mean, I feel oddly comforted. I wanted to first thank Books Are Magic for hosting us, our lovely host Alexa. I do your job, so I understand how much hard work it is, and I just wanted you to know you appreciate it. And for all of you coming out and celebrating living poets, and especially to Miller, who I had the great honor of celebrating his debut. And now we're here, going 2 for 2. I've been thinking a lot about attachment and detachment all year. And I've been trying to figure out how to make language around the fact that I'm really bad at detaching. I don't know how to be a cold, unfeeling reptile. I'm a very chalant ass shorty, so. I've been chalant my whole life. Anyways, yeah, I wrote this yesterday on the Uber ride home. Oh yeah, by the way, sorry, I don't live in Brooklyn anymore. I live in Chicago now. I did just come out here for this reading and another reading and also a concert. But I also, yeah. Do you want to come, Jason? I have an extra ticket. Okay. It's a sea serpent with feet.
Oh.
Oh, okay. All right, we'll talk later. On detachment. It does get easier. Being left, I mean. Eventually, all things succumb to finality. And it isn't just you're near leaving without goodbye. Or if I didn't search for you, there wouldn't be air between us. It's that when I was close enough to touch, neither of us reached. I've come to measure longing this way. Tender is the voice of indifference, a hand pressed to a lonely back, apathy's unturning face. What is the distance between clarity and begging? Maybe longer than I thought. I once believed all attachments were built the same, and so the worship must be equal. The body a field I've made lush with neglect. I would starve from love waiting to be wanted. I decided I'm not better than this loneliness, but no longer will I gather what falls. One of my dear sweeties, Carly Joy Miller, is here in the audience, so I'm dedicating this poem in part to you. Surprise. The book my debut book in progress reimagines Cain and Abel's sisters. And so this is one poem from it, which begins with an epigraph. What kind of girl are you? The kind who wants to live. Vivy Francis. Patience in the bramble. I don't remember squeezing the trigger, though I never forgot the smell of gun smoke, of the wild dog's eyes ruined between rage and confusion. How I waited too long to shoot, and the beast an eyelash short of my throat when the bullet pierced its chest. I don't remember Adam handing me the misericord, but the blade never forgets completion. Blood darkening a halo about the animal's head. There were many animals slain beneath me, then other girls. I never started the fight, but I always ended it. And sometimes the fighting ended me. On my back, on my knees, loose braids from another girl as trophy. Again, mama hollering I've torn another good frock. That I refuse to behave like a proper girl, more rough than gorgeous because my girlhood is fox-shaped, knows how to hunt and how to be hunted. Instead of I love you, Adam teaches me how to curl my hands tight, how best to stand for balance. All these years I thought he was trying to bond, but I understand now it was to armor me against this life for when he would one day leave. I understand now it was to armor me against this life for when he would one day lay beneath it. Obedience only afforded me an enemy's failure. The boys thought they could corner me, but what I lacked in height, I made up in precision. So I grabbed the tallest one down by the collar and kneed him in the jaw. I wanted the boy to learn what life had yet to teach. That's what I told his mother when she called me an animal on her haunches who must now outrun the riot of boys. Imagining the years of running laid bare. I can shed my velvet, but not my girlhood. A girlhood mothered by scraps, fathered by a fist. Okay, yeah, sure. I guess we really are just going off barbs tonight. I wrote this poem about being my dad's favorite boy, daddy's girl. Lord, forgive me. I am my father's child, cunning and arrogant with beauty. Daughter prince, Adam's first, his sweet apple. I have his eyes. No man beneath God tells me what to do. Sly and nimble, I was called mischief more than my own name. And so when I caught Adam smoking a coveted pack of cigarettes, he rewards me with admiration, him with my obedience. My girlness bound beneath overalls to mama's disappointment. What she couldn't corral beneath a dress or brush back into even barrettes she sent to Adam. We exchanged glances, laugh with our eyes. She doesn't get it, and how could she? I am 8 and only can see my mother for her gender. Woman, meaning loneliness, is the animal I know best. She's never been a girl, never been sent beneath the tender yoke. The feminine urge to be my father's best boy. I boyed better than the other boys, peed standing up, won every game of nut check, shot my first kill by 10, caught trout by the mouth at 12, could spit a perfect parabola in the air. Feral against the demure, I braid my hair back like Queen Latifah and set it off. Handsome for the boy mouth singing Shmino. Clever as I think I am, I could not stop the body's machinery. Mammogenesis begins me again. Lot's wife is a common story. A tale told from mothers to daughters about disobedience, shame measured in salt. I refused the mercy of my sister's honesty when she told me our father's betrayal would happen. My girl mistreated like that of a fox, deceitful. Oh, Father, I have been a girl all my life. I have no other history, no other master but you. Do we have time for two more? With the short one and the medium-sized one? One more? Okay. Cool. Yeah. Okay.
When do we get to read this book? When is this coming out?
That's a good question. I actually sent it to Perugia, actually, so we were gonna... Yeah, I did. Okay, this is like TMI, but I was like ovulating like crazy, right? And I just like did a lot of crazy shit that week, including sending my book out with 2 major prizes, like a psychopath. Anyway, I wrote a poem about my first love, who I didn't realize was my first love until I went to Breadloaf last year. And I spent like a whole year dreaming about him. We don't have time to get into it. It was a lot. I did end up talking to him. He's getting married later this year. He seems really happy, probably. I don't know the man anymore, but yeah. David, I loved you when I was a child, and so my love for you was childish. For 9 lifetimes you've haunted my dreams. 9 lifetimes of finding me in the tender hours that hang low enough to touch, which doesn't help ease me to sleep. You marked in memory, lips overwrought of sweetness, mouth like a 2-worn kicked-in fence. Green eyes pursuing me through the years. So quiet your lashes against my breast, I could mistake you for faith. Zora says it's useless to justify desire, and so dawn betrays me to sunlight. I say I have no use for nostalgia, and still you return. Not as the man you are now, but as the boy I loved at 16, at 17. Knowing nothing of love then, I understood devotion, but not who was worthy of it. All my life, so much of the grace I gave at the cost of grace for myself. We could have wasted the hours in a heady field of spring, called it a marriage. Maybe all childish love is the fleeting light I will never touch again. In the dark, I bite you with my softest teeth.
We have time for like 10? Yeah. We have time for 10 minutes of Q&A.
Talk at us.
Yeah, ask us anything.
Questions.
Tell us things.
You can tell us things too if you want. We don't hear how people's days are.
They're shy. We're a lot. Mahani.
Okay, I did lose my thought. It's okay, I'll come up with a new one. Just generally, I want to go in and say all of your piece. Thank you so much for sharing and for writing that, for creating that, and putting that into the world. It's very hard to be so vulnerable and tap into that aspect of your personhood and then put it on a plate and say, here, look at what I made for you. Please enjoy. Like, that's so beautiful. So thank you. Second, this is my, I'm going to address Miller first because, that's my teamwork, but I'm so happy that I got the truth. When writing impossible things, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to, if you're not comfortable, but when writing impossible things and then interweaving your father's memoir, I'm sure that for a lot of these, it was very emotional, putting, even in the editing process, littering words to an emotional center. Is there any poem in particular that really made you have to take a break when tapping in and fine picking? Because that's so much of poetry revision.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, I think I'll say there's a poem in here called Joshua Was Gone that I didn't read because it's long. But I started writing it when I was in high school. And the poem is about the fact that my father kept one of his son's sneakers in his closet. And so my whole childhood there was this shoe. And as soon as I became a poet, I probably became a poet because of the shoe. Maybe. If that happens to you, you're probably just gonna be an artist. But I knew I had to write a poem about it. And I tried, and they were really, really bad. and they just like they didn't work. And so really like the whole, like I finally got it right and it's in the book, but it took so long. And I think partly because when things make us really emotional, it's hard to get that distance. And I really needed a little distance from it. And I think the thing that helped me with that distance was having children of my own. And then I like had this other layer. I didn't understand at all my father's experience until I had children in that way. And so like that was, yeah, if you want to call working on something for 20 years needing a break, then yeah. Yeah, really long breaks. You don't have to finish it. I thank you so much to my students who are here. You don't have to finish something like when it's due. Like, yeah.
Here's what I tell my middle school students: we can just sit here in awkward silence for as long as you want, and I'm just gonna scan the room, and if somebody wants to break the silence.
Such a, yeah.
Yeah, I have a question for Jason. How did you come across the photographs that you're writing this series of poems about? What drew you to that topic?
For them, I was reading a book. My first book dealt with the idea of intimacy and violence when it comes to cruising. So I like did a lot of like research into that, and then my friend suggested a book called The Poetics of Cruising. And in the first, like the introduction of it, there was it was talking about 3 photographers, but I saw Alvin's name and I had never heard of him, and he was like known as the lesser known in that book. So I like looked up the photos, and like the first photo I saw, I had to write something, and I looked up another one, I had to write something, and I ended up with, God, I think I'm at like 30 something poems now, because I just kept seeing photos and kept having to write. So yeah, that's how I got it.
What helped you to make the choice to interact with your father's memoir as erasure, specifically?
I was a very late choice in the book. At first what I did was I excerpted the parts from his book that I thought were the best writing, because, you know, there's poems in here where I make a lot of fun of him, and like it's not a worshipful relationship, but at the same time I like didn't want to be a complete asshole, and so I chose the parts of his book that I thought were the best written and the most beautiful, and I tried interspersing those. And at really late I was like, this isn't working, this is really not working, like they're not poetic enough, it's not working with the rest of the book, and it wasn't ghosty enough. Like really it's kind of a ghosty book where I'm trying to communicate with the dead, which I think all writing is anyway. So that occurred to me, and what I did was actually at the end of the book there's a cento that I made out of lines from his book, which if you've never written one, I highly recommend. It's a form where you use all lines made up of other poems or works, and I made a cento poem out of lines from his memoir. And then when I made the cento, I decided to start erasing it, and then when I started erasing it, I was like, oh, I have to do this to everything. And then it was fun. And I think that's like something too when you're writing and revising, when something actually feels fun, like you gotta just keep doing it. Maybe that's what happened to you with the photographs. Yeah.
That's it, yeah.
Pain and fun.
Pain and fun.
Yeah.
How late did that decision come in, like, you conceiving this as a book, too? Because I'm curious about, like, how long you let something, like, marinate, like a poem goes for 20 years, and I guess that, like, how fully conceived was the book as a project? And far along down, like, the publishing kind of route?
Really far.
That's really interesting, that's cool.
Yeah, like my book was accepted by Duke
Yeah.
without the poems having been erased. And so it like happened really, really late. Yeah.
That's cool.
I'm so glad I thought it wouldn't have been as good. Yeah. So no shade to him, but it wasn't like it just wasn't working as a book. Yeah. And I think that's the thing too, like we have to take our time when we're revising things so that you can approach it not like, oh, this is my child that just came out of my body. But like this is my child that I want to send to school to interact with other people. To continue a metaphor for no reason. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I work here, but I have questions. This is a question for everyone, and I was just wondering if there's anything y'all do when you're stuck, if there's anything you read, or any practice to get yourself unstuck. I don't know.
I love that. Should we go down the line? Joan, do you want to start?
I
thank you for asking.
I binge watch TV.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
I just give up for a while.
No, it's good. It's good to give up sometimes.
And I actually do blackout poetry
Fun.
because I feel like it's using the creative part of my brain without having to create something new. So I would say those are the two things. And sometimes I just lie awake staring at the ceiling with rage. I can't write. That's pretty much it.
I will revisit the books that I love. Forest Primeval by Vivi Francis is like my holy grail in the distance. I mean, everything Vivi Francis has ever written is that for me. I really revisit War of the Foxes by Richard Siken because of the logical, the way in which he negotiates logic in every poem, right? The parallels that he makes constantly makes me remember, oh, this is what poems can do, that's right. And then I also will reread Madness, Rack, and Honey by Mary Ruppel. That book is always like really good about reminding my brain, oh, this is what you had under these ideas actually, like this is actual language. And sometimes I'll just go on a night ride. I will get an Uber, drive somewhere, smoke a blunt. Don't repeat that, please. And like kind of go outside and like figure out my brain, right? Because sometimes when I'm stuck, I'm realizing that it's either I'm getting in my own way in writing, or I'm trying to talk myself out of what I actually want to do because I don't think it's good. Someone had tweeted the other day something like, the function of the first draft is not to be polished, but to have building clay for the actual poem, right? And then once I remembered that, I'm like, oh, I could just do whatever I want. That's great. Okay. Yeah.
I'm taking all this in. I'm gonna watch the recording of this later to remember these things. I will write centos, like go to the library, go to a really big bookstore or library. Nah, you can't do it at a bookstore, don't do it. But like a university library that's dusty and old and nobody's paying attention, and where you can really unshelve like 100 books and not worry about it. And like just pull out lines from like dusty old books that nobody's looked at for a long time and then try to make a poem out of them. And also sometimes like exercise, honestly, like just to get the like oxygenate the blood, or like sometimes listen to music, but like also I agree with Joan, like let it lie fallow.
Yeah, that's true.
Like
sometimes it's
just
good
like
too.
quitting is totally viable and you can always unquit.
Yeah, that's true.
And like
the worst thing that you could ever do is try to force the poem.
Yeah,
like, try to
you
like
can't.
white knuckle yourself through it because you're gonna look back and be like, wow, this is ass.
This
like,
is
this is bad, and the poem should feel bad. Like, what is this?
Totally, but like also just reading and like reading for pleasure.
Yeah.
Like whatever you like. I like to read science fiction. Like reading science fiction and like sometimes writing down notes of like lines just randomly in a notebook. Writing anything, like writing the alphabet. Yeah.
What's me?
It's you.
I think as an avid quitter, I definitely take a step back a lot, and I think about, I truly think about everything I'm doing as an act of writing poems. So like if I'm walking, if I'm having conversations, like clearly I'm doing a full catalog of like just events that are happening. So any of those allow for me to feel like I'm still in the act of writing. So I'm not always pressed. Now, I can't say this as of like 4 years ago, the shit would have drove me crazy. But like I'm not always pressed of like with the idea that I can't write the poem, right? So like if I'm trying to write a poem and it's just not coming, it just means that the poem isn't ready to be written yet. Another thing I tell all my students is that I believe that the poetry is smarter than I am. So I'm not writing the poem is writing itself, and I'm just the vessel. And one of those things is to understand that maybe the poem is not truly ready to write itself. And that means I have to do other things until it's ready.
I heard you say that last week. And it's been like so meaningful to me. Like you said, I'm not smarter than my poems. And that is so real. Like, and I think not forcing it. Like, yeah. I'll let you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Emma.
I know at least a couple of you are full-time writers, if not all of you. So what does it look like for you to make time to write? Or, like, do you have a routine?
You wanna start this way?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Notes app. It's real cute.
Oh yeah. That's how I wrote my whole chapbook. Actually, I wrote it all in my notes app.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Notes app. I just write when I can, when I have a chance. Very safely, not while driving. Yeah, that's all I'm saying.
I have a completely opposite thing to say, which is that nothing I've ever tried to type into my phone turned into anything that I would ever show a living soul. I am super streaky, and I get really mad at people who are like, you have to write every day at the same time.
Nope.
Or like, you'll never amount to anything.
Lies.
You'll
Lies
die
and deceit.
alone. Like,
Deception.
yeah, it's all like white supremacist deceptions. Like, I think like I will find a way to get like 3 days alone somewhere and just like go wild. And, you know, do whatever I need to do with nothing else but like chunks of time. Even if they're kind of short. And I'll get so much done like that. And not be mad at myself that I didn't write anything good for 6 months. And then just give myself the space, and like usually that really helps me.
I wrote 3 books in 2021.
She did.
And like
True.
no, I'm just saying there was this period, there was like a 1-year period of time where I would set my alarm for 4 o'clock in the morning on weekends.
I mean, you also wrote mom, so I understand. You got a lot.
Yeah, well, I'm a little obsessive.
Yeah.
Like a lot of us are.
Yeah, that's
So I
true,
was
yeah.
up at 4 o'clock and, you know, I would have 2 hours before my kids woke up. And I would write every day from 4 to 6 a.m. And I just wrote and wrote and wrote like on a daily basis for that whole year. And then I would go 6 months, 9 months without writing anything. And then there, you know, like other than having a prolific period of time, there have been days where because I'm a teacher, like sometimes I'll get really lucky and my prep period and my lunch will be next to each other and I can find a way to write for like 20 minutes. And sometimes that's all I have. You know, I started taking the train to work, so now I have that period of time also where I'm not like in traffic questioning all my life decisions, but instead I'm on a train and it's like really relaxing. So I've been reading on the train and, you know, I don't know, it's just like finding little ways, and then also when that obsession hits you,
Oh yeah.
like when the fire hits you, just drop everything if you possibly, I mean, keep your children alive, but drop everything else. I also have an amazing friend who put together like a mini writing retreat for a bunch of us who are just super busy. 3 days in her house, all we did, like she made food, and all we did was like write, barely talk to each other, eat, and sleep. It was amazing.
Lovely.
That's when I wrote that whole chapbook. Like 33 poems in 3 days.
Amazing.
So I am super fortunate that I was offered an artist residency at Northwestern, and it's like really loose. They're like, here's an office, here's space, here's unlimited free printing. Finish your book. So I will have like whole weeks where I'm just like writing, and like I'm not a person. Don't contact me. I can't help you. Like I'm not like a physical being in this plane. And then I will just have like weeks where I will just go back to being a person again. And I do think it's really important to have that balance, because being a person in the world is where the poems come from, right? I think all of us can say in one way or another that we observe the world consciously or unconsciously, and that finds its way into the work, right? And yeah. So I think it's just like really important to make time to go out and drink and be ignorant, and then make time to do art. If you drink, no pressure.
Right on that note. That is thank you guys so much for coming out. Know where y'all checked in, and if you just want to mind your belongings, because we have to turn this into the kids section again. But other than that, have a great evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Books Are Magic.
Hello there, how are you?